Yep, got it. From a mile away, sight casted it. And it's big. It's huge. Yep. Big. Yep, got it on the stall, mate. Yep. Oi, what a jump, mate. On the stall again.
Yeah, a little bit of bait.
Yep.
They don't miss it. When they want it, they get it.
Welcome to the Barraburner Fishing Guide. I'm so excited to be bringing this video to you. I always like to release lures with a helpful video on how to use them and give you some insights into the design, the thought that's gone into building this lure. And this is much more than just a packet of plastics. What you're getting with these brand new Barraburner lures is going to blow your mind. It's some of the most exciting fishing on offer with some of the stuff that comes standard in this. So we're going to have a look at the design, the rigging systems that I've constructed and put into this packet for you guys. We're also going to take a look at the conditions and give you some tips on how you can go about your barra fishing, some of the gear you want to remember to take with you if you're going chasing barramundi and Murray cod in the dams, and get into all of the nitty-gritty behind these details. This is my Barraburner, and it's taken me 23 prototypes to get that little tail right. Aside from the rest of the profile, you can see it's got a beautiful bait fish profile. And I've used real baits to give me the dimensions, the shapes, the size of the eye, the raised gill plate. Everything has come from a real bait, okay? Whether that's a barred grunner, a mullet, little bony brim, I've been catching and using those fish to guide my construction of this lure. The fin structures on here are really important, okay? And they provide you with a whole load of options as to how you can change this lure or what you get straight out of the packet, which is absolutely dialed to keep your confidence going when you're chasing big fish. We're going to get right down to it. I want to take you through the details so you intimately know what's going on with this bait so that you can get the most out of it. And then we'll get into the tips and some conditions that are going to help you with your barra fishing. If you take a look at this tail, this is sort of synonymous with my brand now. You can see this upturned tail that's come from my jack burners, and my paddle glides have all got this similar style of tail. And what that does, it's been constructed and it's different to the others. It had to be because the bait size is different, but it allows you to get an action even on a slow fall. And one of the ways that this is rigged is unweighted. So even as a slow sinking glide, this tail still gives you an action that can trigger those barra. You can slow roll this lure, you can high speed burn it, you can fish shallow, deep. Any speed and any depth is going to give you what you need with this Barraburner. So that tail, 23 prototypes, it's loose as can be. It's got a little joint in there that really frees it up so you don't have to do any modifications. And then if you look at those fins, the fins on this are different to just about everything you're going to find. There's a reason for these fins, okay? And we'll talk about that as we get into some of the ways that this is rigged. You've got a scale pattern, beautiful fin structures. You've got a raised gill plate, holographic eye, and then you've got this system at the top here, this dorsal slit that allows you to rig it different ways. Now you can repair this bait, it's really hardy, it's a PVC material that's going to last in those hot barramundi style conditions up north, and then you can repair it really simply, and I'll take you through some of that stuff when I'll give you some tips. So that's the construction of my Barraburner. A whole lot of testing and prototyping's gone into it, and I'm going to share with you some of the action in the field, like out on these dams and out in these rivers where we've been catching and smashing great fish on these lures. I'll take you through what the internals look like. So as standard in the packet, it comes rigged 3 different ways. So you have a 1 ounce insert with big heavy trebles, big custom built 1 ounce jig, Then you've got the 1/2 ounce, the same style thing. It all fits in there and comes standard. Big swivel, big split rings. And then you have this unweighted, custom built EWG style that fishes like a paddling glide bait. And that's it there. So you can see that it comes, it's a huge hook that I've had to build for this because I didn't want it to be pulling out on barra. It jumps into the jaw of those barras in the hinge point beautifully, and it allows that lure to have a keeled body roll that you can bring in all the way up to a medium burn with an unweighted plastic that paddles. You are gonna love fishing with this thing. You can see the big heavy treble that it comes with, and you can remove that if you want. You can remove that treble. You can leave the ring and the swivel on there so that it still falls and keels properly. But if you're going to fish this in through heavy weed, you can take that treble off. You can leave it on there if you're going to be dropping it into little holes and patches around the weed. Fishing around timber, these things are absolutely fantastic. It comes in the packet with a foam insert. Every packet has a little pack of accessories, including spare beads, keeper bands, spare eyes, but this little foam insert goes where the jig gets inserted. You can just wet that and slide it into position, and that will slow the fall rate of this down. So for live scope fishermen who want to chase barra in the shallows, and I've got a whole heap of action showing you how to do that just under the surface, these things are absolutely deadly. The way that they come in this packet, I've constructed these packs to look after the tail, and this is where you should keep the lures really, because that tail, the way that it sits like that in the packet, it means that as soon as you pull it out, it's ready to work as hard as it possibly can. If these lures get left on a boat deck and bent out of shape, you can put them in a cup of boiling water, pour the boiling water in for sort of 30 seconds, and they'll find their way back to their shape like that. They'll return to that starting position and repair themselves. If they get bitten up, you can use a lighter, and I always do this. I keep a lighter in the boat to be able to just plastic weld them back together. You heat it up, you can see it start to heat up, you push it together and it's good to go again. And they last in that hot weather. Okay, I've looked at the TPE models, I've had samples of TPE, and they're just not as good long term, and the action on them is different than these PVC models, and that's why I've gone with PVC. Now the material that these are made out of allow me to get better colour schemes. So I've got a whole heap of your favourite colours throughout the range. There's Potty Mullet, Glamour Garfish, there's the Golds, the Flex, there's Mondi Magic, and a red claw pattern that I think is absolutely fire in the dams, especially up north. There's also one of the favourite colours which has hit my range, and you guys have been buying tons of these with the Paddle Glide and my Jack Burner. This is Summer Whiting. And they have these UV charged colours. So under a black light you'll get a sense of that, but all of them start to light up with that UV colour. There's modifications that you can do to this bait, and I've built it so that you barra fishermen that love to do this stuff can get your hands on them and change them the way you want to. If you look at the back, that little fin there, that gives you a micro action. Okay, and when it's slow falling, that thing is always working, just like the fin on a little mullet or a little bait fish. That little stabilizing fin down there is always on the move. These flare fins, they dampen the action slightly. I love them and I use them generally as standard, but you can tear them off. If you want to increase your body roll, you can tear those flare fins off. I've built them so they come off easily. You can snip them off for a tidier finish. You can pop that rear fin off if you want, and you end up with a really smooth looking bait, okay, that has the most tail action, the most thump and body roll, right, that you can get out of these, and it is absolutely gold. You feel it right through the rod tip if that's what you're after. But that's not always the key to getting the bite. If you have a look closely on the tail, I've built in a design to help you dampen the action. That paddling tail, especially in pressured waters, you can cut that down to give it less of a thump, less of a body roll and a wobble, and it just gives it a little shudder, almost like a knuckle on the back. And there's a guide there as to how to cut it down. Okay, I rarely will use that, but generally, straight out of the pack, that's how I like to roll with it, and just go from there. Now there's two little rattles that come in this accessories pack here that allow you to change the sonics and the amount of vibe that this thing puts out through the water. You can do that by pushing in. There's a little space under the belly there, underneath the hook of this jig, where you can push it across and sit it in that belly. Okay, and there's a little bit of ribbing on those rattles that help keep it in place. I like to dab just a little bit of Loctite gel, like that gel super glue that's available from Bunnings, just to hold it in position. Okay, if you use super glue, it'll start to get really hard and it'll harden over that plastic. So those gel glues are the way to go. But that's all stuff that you can do if you're really keen on tricking these things up, changing the action, putting out more vibe and that kind of a thing. I want to share with you the type of gear that I use to throw these lures and how you can get the most out of them. Now, even this unweighted one, this Glide that comes with this EWG, you can throw that a mile. It doesn't have any lead in there. The weight of the hook and the shape of the bait, the size of the tail, it's all come into the design to allow you to get big distances with this. So 40 metres is definitely achievable. Big long cast, wind assisted cast, you can get at 50 metres. It can absolutely fly out and get away from the boat. And on those super calm days, like you may have seen in some of the footage, especially some of the action that I've captured hooking barra on glass outs, when there's no wind around, you want a subtle land.
Yep.
Okay, watching through LiveScope, you can see big 1 ounce jigs on a glass out. If you're chasing fish up near the surface, they hear that, and a lot of the time they'll spook away from it. I've learnt that from that live fishing using the active target. So something like this that's unweighted and has the lightest of lands, often they'll just come straight in on it and bite it straight away. It's very natural. The sound of that land, like a boney just flicking the surface, it's going to blow you away how you get taken right under the surface with big barra on this thing. The gear that I like to use to throw this, I love 30-pound line, like braided line, 30-pound, and spooled right to the edge of my 3000 size Vanford. Now 3000 size reels, especially stuff like this Vanford, they're so light, but the drag is jacked in them, and they can definitely handle big fish. Don't be scared of chasing giants on a 3000 reel if it's smooth and the drag is really good. Long casting days, you want that lightness in your setup. So this is a 274 extra heavy Zodius paired with my 3000 Vanford. That is my favourite casting combo for chasing barramundi in the dams. Okay, 30-pound braid, and then I tend to run like a 80-pound leader. So an 80-pound leader, and look, you can see it's only like a foot long, maybe a foot and a half long at this point. Generally I'll go for near a metre, but I'm trying to keep it out of the guides. That FG knot that joins the braid to the leader, when that's going through the guides all day, I just don't think it's great for your rod. So I try to keep it short enough to get out of those guides and not be going in during your casting session, but long enough so that when the barra inhale this thing, and they do, because it's unweighted, it sucks in beautifully into a barra's implosion feed. When this goes in, you want it to be long enough so that you're not getting to the braid, okay? Otherwise it's just going to saw you off. Just make sure that you've got enough in it so that when they're rasping you up, you're not losing the fish of a lifetime because you're running 40-pound leader or whatever. Now look, 90% of my fishing is done with that setup. So long casts, big days on the water, that Zodius 274XH and the Vanford, that's what I use nearly all the time. When I'm live scoping, and I don't always do it, but when I'm live scoping, the option of having like a T-curve like this one here, this is a heavy action, so a 641 BCH T-curve, and my favorite reel, I use this for everything, is my 200 Corrado. And using live where you're just tucking in around the boat with shorter casts and targeting fish in your scope, being able to get that position and that location cast with that, being able to land it on a dime, that's something that I like to fish with. And generally I do that outside of the timber, like in open water, in open bays, okay? I steer clear of using a bait caster myself personally if I'm around timber, because being able to free spool when a barra goes around the timber, by pressing that button down, it gets jammed when you've loaded up and you've got a big heavy drag and you're going hard on a barra. Being able to press that down in the moment when you need to be able to open your spool up, you can get into sticky situations with that. Even with jacks, I've had problems with that. So a spinning outfit to just completely free up a barra as it's heading around sticks so you don't get snapped off, that's the way to go, I reckon. Now I've designed these to be able to help you fish right through changing conditions. Okay, so even from like before sunup, you can be fishing this, and I love to fish really shallow. So fishing this unweighted one before the sun gets up, early morning in the shallows, low light conditions, these unweighted barra burners are absolutely fire. You can fish them really slow and sit it in front of the fish's face, and that is an absolute game changer. If you watch live scope fishermen fishing in those slower conditions, really slowing down. You can't do that with other soft plastics. This thing allows you to do it. You can almost jerkbait style fish with this, and you can slow sink this down and sit it right in front of a barra, or land it out in front of a barra without spooking it and let it sink down, and then slow roll it back and sit it in front of its face. What you can do with this unweighted version with the foam or without is insane. So shallow water stuff down to like 5-6 feet, this unweighted version is absolutely killer, especially if you're wanting to fish slow. And that's one of my key tips for you as well. When you go to these dams, as you vary your retrieve speed up, being able to slow right down with a lure like that and just sit a lure off a point that's just slowly sinking down through the water column with a tiny little twitch action every now and then, that thing, you're going to have your mind blown by that thing. Yep, got it on the stall, mate. Yep, oi, what a jump, mate. On the stall, again, he's completely hoofed it. Now, as that light comes up and those conditions change throughout the day, I tend to go to like a 1/2 ounce. You might be able to see that in there. You can see it, you can feel it. The one with the 1/2 ounce, that second one down, it's a lot lighter. It's a 14 gram jig head, so 1/2 ounce down in there will get you across the tops of weed, down through the weed. You can take that treble off if you want to punch through heavy weed. But fishing as the day starts to progress and that sun starts to come up, you kind of want to go deeper. Those barra, they're so light sensitive. Same as mangrove jack. They want to get into those darker areas, hide in the weed, hide in the dark patches, and that's what you're going to be able to achieve by getting deeper throughout the day. So that 1/2 ounce allows you to do that. It's a great search bait, okay? If you're wanting to go and scan through a shallow bay of like 6 to 15 feet of water, that kind of thing is fantastic. Whether you slow roll that or speed it right up, it's been built so that it can handle anything. The 1 ounce here allows for long casting range. And you can do the same thing. You can scan and pan fish with this, find those areas where you're trying to search for big fish, and allows you to fish even faster. That thing will not blow out. The tail design, 23 prototypes I said, I've gone through to get it right. It will not blow out at speed, and big long casts allow you to go searching for fish and fish deeper. You can slow troll that. If you want to go and fish off points and things like down 20, 30 feet, that 1 ounce is absolutely ideal. Fish are much more comfortable in those deeper areas, especially when the sun is high or when the light penetration is really high. That's the thing you want to use during the middle of the day, from sort of like 8 o'clock onwards, right through until sort of 2, 3, 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when I start to transition back. So if you've got overcast conditions or interchanging light with clouds and things like that, that's when you want to be fishing, really. Like, I love these conditions where the light's a bit obscured and that kind of thing. Sunrise and sunset, your moon phases, they're the conditions that you're really dialing in and wanting to be casting for. And you want to be prepared on the water with that stuff. Now, the tips that I've got for you to really get your barra going with these burners, you have to give yourself the best chance. Stop before you get to your spot, slow down, and enter with absolute stealth. If you're slamming your net on the side of the boat as you get prepared for like if you're doing these ones, the barra are hearing that everywhere. Okay, if you've ever been underwater and tapped a stone together or tapped a ring on a rock, that transmits way further than you realise. So any noise on the boat when you're approaching your barra spot, your little bay or your point, it's going to kill your fishing. And that goes for any big fish. Murray cod, my flathead and jack fishing, it's all the same. You need that ultimate stealth. So don't go slamming hatches, don't go dropping your pliers onto your tinny, just be as quiet as you possibly can. You can see the foam that I run around the edge of my boat here. Hopefully you can see that black foam. That makes everything quieter, whether it's the rod tinking on the side of the boat. I'm really dialed into that and it makes a huge difference. So they're my biggest tips for you. Before you've even thrown a lure, you can do yourself out of some barra. Stealth is absolutely the key. So your approach on any given stretch of water, try and be as quiet as you can and just electric motor in for 100 metres or so to get to your spot, really quiet and stealthy. Get set up and casting before you're actually into position. Start casting way off the bank. A lot of barra will sit way off those banks, and I've got video footage of getting that done like that, catching beautiful big fish before I even get to the right spot where I'd like to fish, sort of an edge or a drop off of a weed bed. So casting and getting going before you're actually in position is a great way to silence everything down by the time you get there. If you've got big wind, which is a great time to chase some barra, if there's wind blow, follow that and go and fish it. But that wind blow will sort of hide your approach as well. So that's another time when I'll go for those 1/2 and 1 ounce baits. When it's a glass out and you want that quiet approach, that really subtle splashdown, that's the time when I'll use my unweighted version and let it slow sink down to whatever depth I need it to get to. Now, the last couple of tips I'll give you before we get into some gear that I think you should carry on the boat with you when you're doing this stuff. You just want to be safe on the water, okay? If you're going out onto these dams, you definitely want to have lighting, especially if you're fishing into late afternoon and evening. You make sure you've got like a spotlight. I've got a spotlight in here. I've got 2 actually. One that I can mount like an LED off the front and a handheld spotlight because the timber is gnarly out there. You definitely need to have your maps sorted with your GPS and your sonar stuff. You can turn all that off. You don't need to fish with that. Some days I'll use it, some days I'll use active target, some days I prefer definitely not to. But you want to have those safety things in. I'm always running a life jacket, and that sits now with all of the Queensland fisheries. You need to be running a life jacket, guys, and you should be anyway because of the timber at high speeds chasing up through these dams, especially places like Mondi. You should be wearing a life jacket. A couple other pieces of kit that you might want to take with you. I run like these safety goggles, and I took them out last night to mow the lawn, but some clear safety goggles when you're coming home in early season summer or during summer on dusk when there's insects and that around. If you're traveling at speed and you can't quite see because it's low light, you don't want to wear sunnies. It makes it too dark. Clear safety goggles, they're like $2-3 bucks. They can save your eyes from getting bugs just hammering you in the eyes. Couple other pieces of kit you want. Big Enviro net. So knotless mesh nets are the way to go. These big Enviro nets, they are collapsible and they're strong enough, big enough to hold those giants. I've got foam around the edge of mine to dull it, so when I put it down it's quiet, as you can see. The other thing you want to think about is how you're going to hold yourself off a bank. Now this is a plonk that I've constructed. You don't need something like this. You can use a brick if you're sitting in weed, and I've used a brick plenty of times. But that's a plonk that I've used from like roof cladding from Bunnings. I just purchased some of that lead roof cladding, melted it down and made on the end of like some stretchy bike tube with the rope running through it, a silent plonk. So I'm silent when I'm sitting there. I don't have the chain of an anchor or the movement of a regular anchor waking all of those barra up. Now that's quite expensive, that lead. Here's another option for you. Zach put me onto this at the refuge shop. Went to the tip, got some weights, and then grab this stuff from Bunnings. So the eye bolt and all the stainless steel stuff in these washers, you just put it around your weights and then you can change your weighting depending on the conditions even, okay, or how big your tinny is. So I've got like 10 kilos in that, and I've just built it so that it kind of digs into the bottom. So that's another way that you can get out of doing a silent anchor a little bit cheaper, but a brick's good enough for a small tinny like this. So that's it. Aside from like a brag mat, and so you want a brag mat to put the fish on, maybe a wet towel to wet yourself down if you're going to cuddle your meatery, some good pliers and accessories. I run hook files. You can get all of that stuff through my website actually that can help you get onto your barra and look after them while they're in the boat. The only other tips that I've really got for you is don't rely just on your tech to try and catch your fish. Don't be overwhelmed by all the tech you see on people's boats. You don't need it, okay? I've got it and I've used it at times, but you watch the videos over the next few months. There's a whole lot of barra fishing and big fish being caught on my boat without even the sounder on or the live target on the boat, okay? So don't feel overwhelmed and think that you need to compete with all that stuff to be able to catch your barra. You definitely don't. If you've got a rod and a reel and a packet of plastics and you switch yourself on and you think about what you're doing, you listen to a few people, you can get your barra fishing going, okay? Going fishing with a guide is a really good tip. Fishing with Lindsay from Barra World early on, Dave Rinkin at Angler's Choice up at Dundee Beach, boy, he kicked my barra fishing into gear. You know, Jason Wilhelm's Impoundment Barra Mastery class, absolutely incredible, if you can get onto that. And Johnny Mitchell's Wild Ways, like everything in those courses is just pure gold and can ramp your fishing up. But if you just want to go out and find your own adventure, explore and work it out for yourself, there is so much in that. And that's really how I got my fishing going. So don't be turned off by the fact you're seeing people out there using their live scope or using their sounders constantly. You don't have any of that stuff. Fishing is as simple as you want to make it, and often that's how I like to do it. All right, folks, I hope you've got something out of this video. I never like to release a line of lures without a guide going beside it to help you and to help you understand what's gone into this. It's been a whole lot of work. I'm really excited to bring them to you guys. I can't wait to see what you catch on them. Make sure you tag me on Instagram or Facebook at My Lure Box. I love to see your catches and share in the wins that you guys are getting with these things. I can't wait to see what you get on them. All right, if you need anything else from My Lure Box, there's a whole load of stuff on my website. You can check out all of those accessories, and there's a whole lot more action coming through My Lure Box on this channel. I'll see you in the next video, and good luck with your barra burners.